Happiness is beautiful, it's a kind reality. Happiness is the highest good, happiness is free. So let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy.
Welcome to the Happiness Show. This is Lionel Ketchian, and I'm here with George Ortega. And we're always here to talk about happiness because happiness is, always has been, and as far as we're concerned, always will be, the point of it all. Today we're going to be talking about the benefits of happiness at work. And we have a special guest today. His name is Cal Sutliff, and he's a personal friend of mine, a person I've gotten to know over the years, many years, and also a person who I've invited to talk about what he talks about so well at our Happiness Club meeting. And he's encouraged and helped others. As I think if you listen, today's topic will be one of interest because we all have to work or know people who come home from work. And we'll find out more about that. Cal Sutliff's message is to be all that you can be, all that he can be, because he wants to assist others to be all they can be. He has been training people and consulting with organizations for more than 20 years. His clients include Fortune 500 companies, smaller organizations, nonprofits, unions, and a variety of government clients. Cal received his bachelor's degree in social psychology from Colgate University and his master's degree in education and human relations from New York University. Cal, welcome to our program today.
Thanks, Lionel. Nice to be with you.
It's wonderful to have you. And why don't we begin by letting you take the lead in talking about where we would start with this whole subject.
Well, I think that you can identify the environment that people work in if you really study it. And there's a wide range of environments. Some are very negative, and it's hard to be happy in that kind of a negative environment. Some are very positive, which kind of just breeds happiness and fulfillment, and people love to go to work in those environments. There's a lot of other characteristics about them that we'll get to. And then some are in the middle, somewhere between those two extremes.
Are you going to show us a little more about how that all comes together?
Well, we can look at some examples of some of the characteristics of those two extremes.
Great.
Let's look at this graphic, which shows the negative influences on work environment on one side and the positive influences on another. So the first one is clarity on the purpose of what it is that the organization is trying to do. If it's unclear, if the direction is not clear, if the mission isn't unclear, that adds to a negative work environment. If it's real clear what it is and you buy into the mission and the purpose of that organization, that's really important to you in making it a positive work environment.
So yeah, so how's that going to impact your happiness? Like if it's a clearer mission, a clearer directive, you have a clearer understanding and you're buying into it more, how does that translate into greater happiness?
Well, I don't think I would be very happy going to work for a place that whose mission and whose purpose I didn't believe in. For example, if they were selling or manufacturing a product that I knew was harmful in some way, that mission and purpose would certainly not lead to my happiness. On the other hand, if I'm working for an organization whose mission I am clear about and then I believe in, it kind of automatically helps me move in that direction.
Great.
Another example would be in a negative environment where the leadership is critical of people and very punishing. That makes it more negative. It's a hard place to be happy in that environment. On the other hand, where the leadership is very supportive, is very optimistic, very positive, it's a different kind of a comfort that you feel.
Right, and I guess that's pretty much relating a lot to self-esteem. And we know self-esteem is very important to happiness. It's really one of the primary ways we gain our happiness. And I imagine, yeah, if the leadership is critical, is punishing, is leading through fear, through like if we make mistakes, we're going to get punished and all, then certainly that can't be a benefit to our self-esteem. Whereas if they're praising us, if they're supporting us and saying we're doing a good job, we're doing good for ourselves, for our company, then that's got to lead to higher self-esteem and then higher to happiness.
Exactly, yeah. Some of these other characteristics, and because we're going to hit some of those now, where there is a lack of feedback between people who are your coworkers and between you and your boss and you and your any direct reports that you're supervising, and that makes it negative. If there is a predominance of negative observations and comments.
I'm sorry, Cal, let's go back to the feedback thing, because that's very important, because like a lot of times I think with employees and companies, when there's not enough feedback, that's going to lead to confusion. They're not going to know what management is thinking about their performance or about overall goals, missions, etc. And then the managers aren't really going to know very well how the employees are feeling about what they're doing. So I think the more feedback there is, not just between management and employees, but between the team members, that's going to create a feeling of confidence, a feeling of self-assurance.
Yep.
That's going to kind of like have the employees basically more comfortable with their work, and of course that's going to help them to become happier.
Exactly. And it's important to say that that feedback doesn't all have to be positive. It in fact should include corrective feedback. If we only talk about the things that are working, we can't correct the things that aren't working. And usually in a work environment, the corrective feedback, even though it's harder to hear, may not make you feel happy at that moment, is usually more useful to you. In fact, that's the test of feedback. Was it useful to the recipient?
I remember reading a book, I think it might have been Norman Vincent Peale's or Dale Carnegie's, where, like, in a sense, when you need to give critical feedback, it's always good to balance it, perhaps initially with praise, with some kind of encouragement. You're doing this right. We're very pleased with this that you're doing. But, you know, in this area, this could use a little bit of help. Do you find that in your work that works?
Well, let me give you a quick thing on that. That was the theory up until the mid-'80s. And then when they did research to see, does this thing get corrected, that you first praise them, and then you tell them what you really want to tell them in the middle, and then in the bottom you add another going away positive. That's called a feedback sandwich. Okay. When they researched, did the thing that needed to be corrected get corrected, the results were not impressive at all. So in the mid-'80s, the theory swung, primarily influenced by Blanchard, to give the positive feedback on its own merits, and then give the negative or corrective feedback on its own merits. So that, see, if you're working in a work environment where everybody's trained to do the feedback sandwich, as soon as you hear some praise or something positive, you get ready for what they're going to say next, right? And then when they throw in another positive at the end, it feels manipulative.
Okay.
So that's an old theory that probably now really we ought to discard.
But in a sense, though, we are saying that we do want to give the praise. That you know, like in addition to the okay.
In fact, we're going to look at some research, I hope, that's going to show what the kind of ratio needs to be between the positive, the praise, and the negative corrective stuff.
Great. Okay.
Some of the other characteristics were, if there's a lot of blaming in the environment, that leads to the negative environment, that leads to away from happiness. If there's a lot of supportive actions and comments from other people, your coworkers as well as your boss. In the negative environments, they usually don't celebrate their achievements. As soon as something gets accomplished, they go on to the next thing. In the more positive environments, they pause, even if it's for 10 minutes. You don't have to always have a big party, but they take a look how much we accomplished in a short period of time, or look at the results, or look at how the customer is pleased by this. And the other thing is a really kind of a sleeper. It's that in the negative work environments, there aren't even a lot of the polite exchanges between people. They really seldom say thank you. They really often don't say pardon me. And in the positive and work environments, they're just common little things with of support are really valuable. In fact, if I could take a minute and give you an example. Sure. I was in a doctor's office getting some a skin cancer removed, And there's a team of about 4 people. They can do that inpatient now. I noticed that they were extremely polite with each other. Somebody would knock on the door and they would say, come in, and as soon as if they left, they would say, thank you, could you hand me the scalpel please? And it was really exaggerated. And I asked in one of the gaps there, how does this team feel about itself? They said, we are the best team around. I said, are all surgical teams and outpatient environments this positive? She smiled and said, no, I don't think so. That's right. So even in an environment where, it's bang, do the business, get it done, the little things make a difference.
Okay, yeah, I want to highlight something. With all these different negative influences and positive influences we've been discussing, they relate to different moments on the job. And we know that happiness, really to a great extent, depends on how many positive moments we have throughout the day. So with each of these instances, basically we're delineating times within the day where interaction can either be neutral, negative, or positive. And again, the more of these positive influences we have, the more situations we create where there is that positivity, the more that's going to lead to happiness moods. And naturally, the more happiness moods the employees have, the happier they're going to become overall. Mm-hmm. So it's really an equation of like trying to increase the amount of time that the employees are experiencing some kind of positivity in addition to their basic work requirements.
Well, I want to add, Cal, that's something you talk about all the time, and we've talked about. What you think about expands, right?
What you think about comes like a magnet. If you're constantly thinking negative thoughts or disaster this or disaster that, you help attract that. I want to add a thing to what you said about not only does it make people happier, but these positive influences influence the bottom line. There's some recent research in the last half dozen years that really support that. It increases morale. It reduces turnover. It even reduces errors, some of the research shows. So it's good for the company as well as good for the individual. And it's really kind of surprising that there are so many toxic work environments out there.
All right, so I think a lot of our viewers may be in work environments that aren't all that positive. What would you recommend to them that they can do to help make their work and their environment, their employees, just happier in general?
Right. I think if I assess my work environment and I said this really isn't very positive, there's a lot of negativities going on, there's a lot of stress and tension there, and ask myself, okay, what can I do? I think it's the simple things that I can do. If I can, make the management aware of the environment, if they stopped and assessed it and saw that and looked at some of the research, that would be great. But a lot of management doesn't even want to pause for that. So it comes down to, okay, what can I do day to day, moment to moment? One of the things I can do is I can be very supportive of Lionel if he's my coworker. I can give him both positive and corrective feedback that's useful to him. I can be polite with my coworkers. Some organizations that I do training in, they say that people come in, they don't say hello to each other at all, or if somebody says hello in the hallway, the other person may not even reply. There's very poor eye contact. There's very lack of politeness. So I have the option of producing all of that stuff in my interactions with people. Those are just some quick examples, and I think there's a lot more that you could add.
Great. Okay. Now, there is like a body of research, as you were referring to before, that really validates this. This isn't just theory. This isn't just advice that someone's just come up with that sounds good. There are actually studies that demonstrate that creating a more positive work environment will make employees happier, will lead to productivity. So if you could explain some of those, yeah.
Okay, well, there certainly are some convincing, very scientifically controlled experiments, and one of them came out of the University of Michigan. Losada was the primary engineer of this research, and so it's known as the Losada research. And they got 60 different business teams to agree to be studied in their regular business meetings for a period of time. And they trained some observers as to what to watch for and listen for. There were a number of things that they were listening for, but I'm only going to talk about one, and that is what they called speech acts. So they're talking about whatever the topic is in their meeting, and if it's a positive comment, that's called a positive speech act. If it's a negative one, it's a negative speech act. Let me give you an example. Let's say that they're addressing a problem. if somebody says, this is really impossible, we're never going to be able to get a bigger market share with this going on, that's a negative speech act. If somebody instead of that says, look, this is really hurting us in the market, we need to find some new way to change an image about this product, that's a positive work environment. They're still talking about the problem. Okay, so the results of the research were this. By the way, they also analyzed the 60 teams before they did the observation as to how effective they were as teams. How good was their bottom line? What was their turnover? What was their productivity? And they divided them into 3 categories. They found that a quarter of them, 15 of the 60 teams, were rated as high performance teams. And 19 of them they identified as low performance teams, and 26 were in the middle, in the medium performance team range. So relative to each other, it was high, medium, or low. When they analyzed the speech acts for all 3 of those teams, they found a very interesting thing. And that is, with all of the high performance teams and with none of the medium or low performance teams, there was at least a 2.9 positive speech act for every negative speech act. In fact, it ranged much higher than that. It was 5 and 6 and 7 times positive for each negative. That wasn't true here. The cutting line was 2.9.
That's great. I want to relate that to some very early happiness increase research. There are 3 classic happiness increase experiments. The second one was done in 1980, and there were actually 2 experiments as part of that paper. One of the experiments had the subjects basically recite affirmations, positive affirmations, for 10 minutes each morning. Now, speech acts, positive speech acts, when somebody's presenting whatever they're presenting, when somebody's saying something in a positive way, that's going to translate into a positive emotion, all right? So in a sense, it's about, like, you know, kind of like a verbal affirmation. So in this study, they found that after about 2 weeks of 10 minutes of reciting these affirmations, these subjects were about 25% happier. So again, this is providing very, very strong evidence that our happiness is greatly dependent upon our moment-to-moment interactions, and we can influence those moments so much by what we choose to say, how we choose to say things. And again, as that study is demonstrating, this is directly applicable to business.
Yeah. In a highly effective work team, morale is higher, turnover is lower, even errors are lower in those kind of environments, and people are more productive.
Yeah, and again, there's a body of research that demonstrates the benefits of happiness, not just positive quote-unquote work environments, but the actual happiness of the employees. And as people become happier, they become more productive, more creative, they earn more money. I mean, there's a vast body of research that I guess businesses are only beginning to become aware of now.
Yep.
Okay, so let's see. Now, we were talking about like how, like in a lot of businesses, you have a leader. You have like a manager or president that's kind of like running the organization. How does a particular leader's management style, leadership style, affect the happiness of the employees and productivity?
Well, I think the number one thing that I would look for is the integrity of the leader. Is the leader say one thing and do another, or does the leader say one thing and then back it up? Secondly, are they constantly looking for things that are wrong and are negative and to blame for? And when something goes wrong, does the whole organization stop and say, who are we going to blame this one on? And you know, it gets passed not necessarily to the person who deserves the blame, even because it's a blame-focused environment. That comes from the leader. Leaders who deal with people as objects rather than people are going to influence happiness a whole lot. Leaders who deal with people in a disrespectful way are going to bring that whole thing down. And the opposite is true. Leaders who are respectful, who have integrity, who are not just looking to blame but are looking to praise. They want to involve people in identifying problems and solving them, but they're not out there to blame people as the bottom line.
Okay, Lionel, I mean, you're the president of your own printing company. You know, have employees under you. Do you find that this works with you?
Well, I got to be very honest. I got to be completely honest and say, I'm letting my son get involved with the business, and very frankly, I've been spending my life on happiness. I mean, I have been devoting myself to happiness. So I'm no longer a good example of a businessman, because I've turned into a person that wants to share happiness primarily. I mean, so but I do understand what we're saying here, because this is what, I mean, after being in business all my life, I think that what Cal's talking about, no wonder I'm dedicating my life to happiness, because we're talking about the difference of the sweatshops of only 100 years ago and kids working. We're talking about that kind of a radical difference to what can happen in a marketplace, in business. If we could just adopt some of the things Cal's talking about, it will be good for all of us. It'll be good for business, good for profit, good for management, good all the way around. So I'm now, on this side of the fence completely. I'm not even...
It's a win-win.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's why I really want you to get in as much as you possibly can, because a lot of what you're going to tell people is what can make the difference out there in business.
Well, there's another piece of research that I think would be a good closing piece, and that is, this happened at UCLA, and they had 150 couples, different married couples, living together couples, long-term relationship couples, and they worked with them during a whole academic year. And one of the things that they found was that the couples who were judged to be most effectively connected and functioning as couples did two things. One of them was that they shared their successes with each other. When they had a good day, they talked about it. When they had an accomplishment, they talked about it. The less effective couples didn't talk about that kind of stuff. Then the second thing was, if I'm your partner and I share something really successful that I did, that I'm really happy about, and you come back at me and say, well, what's for dinner? That is called, in this, let's look at the graphic here. That's a passive constructive response. In other words, you at least listened to me, but then you went, what's for dinner? If instead of that, you interrupted me as I was telling about that and just changed the subject altogether, that's a passive destructive response, not recommended. In the upper right corner, destructive passive, if you show doubt about the whole thing, are you taking credit for something that you didn't really do, Cal? Are you sure that, in other words, they put doubt on it, that's destructive. None of those work very well, and the effective couples didn't go there. But the effective couples went here, an active, constructive response. They celebrated that. They heard it. They acknowledged it. They said, gosh, that must make you really feel good to have done that, right? Two small pieces of a very large study that I think relate. Now, the same thing can happen in the workplace, George. If people celebrate their accomplishments, talk about the things that they feel good about. They just dealt with this customer. When she came in, she was enraged, and I got her calmed down and da-da-da. And the other person then comes back and says, yeah, you really should feel great about that. I saw that, and that was a neat piece of work. That kind of thing just happening in the course of working together makes a work environment much more positive. It really hooks to the question you asked earlier, which is, what could I do if my work environment is very negative?
Right. Now, this is an interesting point, because, from the standpoint of the employee, certainly it's going to be more pleasant. It's going to induce more happiness for people to praise each other and support each other. There are many employees, however, that are in situations, let's say there's a sales team, a sales force, and they're actually competing against each other. And a lot of, companies have incentives. The top performers get better salaries, get other perks, etc. Mm-hmm. So how, in those kinds of situations where you want to support, I would imagine a lot of employees want to support their coworkers, but at the same time they're competing with them. What advice would you have to them for them to allow them to be able to see the benefit of being supportive even though they are competing?
Well, it's a good question. I think that collaboration has taken over in the better companies from competition between people. But the reality is that there are teams competing for a bonus, for example, and if you go the negative route, you try to pull the other person down, the other team down, the other accomplishments down. When you do that, that really brings you down. You know in your gut that that is not a very effective way to be. How can you be happy when you're being devious and not living by what is pretty obvious, appropriate ideals? So if the other way to go is, look, I support them as much as I possibly can, but brother, I'm sure going to win this contest.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and I think another part of that answer is that more and more research is demonstrating that more money does not make us happier, more success does not make us happier. So you get these employees that perhaps are tempted to compete with their co-workers, demeaning them, devaluing their work. Maybe they get those promotions, maybe they get their raises, and eventually, I hope they begin to realize, I hope that this research gets out there more in business, that, yeah, they may get more of those things, but those employees that are demeaning, etc., may be much happier because they're going about their work in the right way. And again, we have to constantly remind employees, employers, businesses in general, that the reason that they're at work is not to make money. I mean, money is a tool. Money pays the bills and all. And so that, like, you know, for example, a lot of workers in the United States make 3, 4, 5 times as much money as they actually need, you know, to live very comfortable lives, but they're still kind of like buying into this idea that, yes, if I get the promotion, if I compete, if I make more money, that's going to make me happier. Fortunately, we have a lot of research demonstrating it doesn't work. It generally doesn't work. So again, it's the idea of communicating to employees. Yes, if you want to use your job in the best possible way for you, not just for your business, treat your employees with respect. You know, encourage each other, etc.
Cal, we actually have less than a minute. Maybe if I give you 30 seconds or so to give us the important thoughts.
Well, I guess I want to add one comment to George's thing about a lot of organizations are in business to make a profit, and that's a valid way to go. And I don't think that being profitable is in conflict with having a positive work environment. In fact, I think the basic message here, Lionel, is that a positive work environment makes better employees, makes better bottom lines, makes more productivity, reduces errors, and it keeps the turnover down.
Well, that's great, Cal. I wish we had more time, and certainly I appreciate you being here with us. But that's about all the time we have left for today, folks. Thanks very much for watching. In the future, we'll explore other topics designed to help us better enjoy life. Be good, think well, feel very happy, and I hope you'll join us again next week on The Happiness Show.
Happiness is powerful, it's our underlying need. Happiness is why we live each day. Happiness is destiny. So let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy.